Elizabeth Fenn, in her book Pox Americana, makes a compelling argument that the outbreaks of smallpox that swept through the eastern seaboard was just one part of a continent-wide epidemic that swept through North America in the 1770s. Connected to this argument, Fenn argues that the historiography of this epidemic demonstrates the ways in which there are, quote, geographic and demographic gaps in our historical canon, unquote. Namely, there is an emphasis upon documentary evidence and thereby an inherent Eurocentrism to previous historiographies. Fenn, for her part, does admirable work to try to fill in some of these gaps, but to some extent, she also falls into a similar documentary-focused trap. Fenn is quite innovative in the types of sources she utilizes to trace the spread of smallpox, particularly in places wherein documentary evidence is rather sparse or wherein documents do not explicitly mention smallpox. For instance, in charting the path of smallpox as it rampaged through Mexico, Fenn utilizes libros de entierros, burial registers. While these documents do not explicitly state the cause of death, by comparing dates, number of burials, and estimating distance from confirmed smallpox outbreaks, one can easily see the path that the disease cleaved through central and northern Mexico. Combined with this, Fenn also looks at the personal notes of various priests, who at a given point stopped recording individual burials and opted to just note the totals for each day. Using these methods, as well as some intuition, Fenn makes a compelling case that smallpox swept through the Southwest. Fenn is also innovative in tracking the spread of the disease across the Great Plains and north to Canada. She gives an extensive history of how groups like the Shoshone, the Sioux, and the Comanche gained access to horses and engaged in trade and combat with their neighbors. Combining this history, various winter counts from different Shoshone and Sioux, archaeological evidence, and intuition, Fenn demonstrates how the Plains tribes spread the disease northwards. From there, Fenn utilizes first-hand accounts from Canadian fur trappers, as well as the recorded life story of Saucampepe, a member of the Piegan Blackfoot, to detail the ravages the disease had on the true north. Fenn does an admirable job in demonstrating that the outbreak of smallpox that originated on the eastern seaboard invariably spread through the rest of the continent through a rather circuitous route. She does impressive work in demonstrating that this was a continent-wide epidemic, a task that is made more difficult by a lack of documentary evidence in key regards. Fenn likewise makes a very poignant point in noting that the historiographies of this epidemic are often Eurocentric. While it is an important observation, it seems that Fenn likewise falls into a similar trap as previous historians. In this regard, for the purpose of her research, she is often relying on documentary evidence as recorded by colonists and settlers. Fenn is primarily relying upon certificates of burials, diaries and reports from fur trappers, letters for aid from military officials, and the narrative of the life of a Native American as transcribed by an English fur trapper. While Fenn does make use of winter counts, they are few and far between and are subject to interpretation. Fenn does not make too much use of oral histories, particularly the oral histories of the Hopi or the Navajo, to tell her story. Fenn does an admirable job in demonstrating her thesis, and her observations are extremely valuable, but to some extent, she is engaging in a similar historiography that she has criticized other historians for.